Hey guys, it's Mrs. Vogel. Missed you guys. Sorry, it's been a couple days. But I know that sometimes the days get away from us, don't they? But I am here to read a couple more chapters of Ruby Holler. But first, let's go ahead and revisit what we talked about the last time we read. So we learned of something called the Understone Funds. And if you can remember, what were the Understones similar to? A bank, right? But it's not a typical bank. I don't go to the drive-through window and pull money out or put money in. Instead, it was basically a box underground that held their money with big stones on top to kind of mask it so people couldn't find it. Not the smartest, in my opinion, way to save money and keep your money safe, but hey, it's working for them so far, right? And then we read through the Holler and Sari and Tiller had gone out to their Understone funds to get some money for their trips. And for some reason, our dearest darling Dallas in Florida thought it would be a great idea to go check up on them. But they weren't checking up on them, were they? What were they trying to do? Right, so not a great choice by them to go and try and find out where their money was hidden and perhaps go into that, right? I'd like to think that their characters are building into good people and that wouldn't have been what happened, but you never know, right? We also learned how they had kind of silly names for some things, like the tickle violets and the bear bush, and the picnic tree and all that, which was a way they would represent different places without having, Babson Park Elementary or, Public Supermarket. It wouldn't be like that. It was kind of a silly name for those landmarks instead, right? They did end up finding themselves getting lost, which brought us to our last chapter of Lost and Found, where Tiller and Sari were pretty upset because they couldn't find Dallas in Florida, to find out that they wandered off, and Tiller kind of thought that it was too much temptation for such young kids with very little. And then we also learned a little bit about their son Buddy, who when he was younger decided he was going to be an orphan and lived out in the barn, and their little story about him. So that was our chapters the other day. So we're going to start off with chapter 22 called A Trip to Boxton. Dallas in Florida had returned to Boxton several times with Tiller and Sari. Each time, the twins had made it clear that they did not want to go near the faded yellow Boxton Creek home leaning toward the railroad tracks. Don't you want to visit your friends there? The ones we know, they're probably gone already. Kids go in and out of there that fast? Well, like a revolving door. And how long have you two been there? Do you mind if I ask you that? What's to mind? We've been there longer than anybody. We've been there like a zillion years. Our revolving door sweeps us right back in there. Oh. We're trouble. Double trouble. You know what our son Buddy used to call himself? Mr. Trouble. He wasn't any more trouble than any of the other kids, but one summer, he got it in his head that he couldn't do anything right. And as they drove out of the Holler, Sari told them the story of how Buddy had decided that he was an orphan and had lived in the barn one summer until Tiller and Sari made the getting over being an orphan triple chocolate cookies. Why'd you tell us that story? I don't know. It just popped in my head. You know what? I just realized something. Me and Tiller are orphans too. Yeah, you're not. Well, technically, yes, we are. Our parents are no longer living. It's not the same thing. Sari patted Florida's hand. You're right, Florida. That was a stupid thing for me to say. I'm so sorry that it popped into my brain and out of my mouth. Hey, you know those triple chocolate cookies you made yesterday? Were those by any chance getting over being an orphan cookies? Sari nudged Tiller. Tiller, is that the recipe you used? Can't rightly say for sure. Enough of this chatter. Here's Boxton. Let's get our plans straight. I know you don't want to hear this, but we really should make a stop to see Mr. and Mrs. Don't you say it. Don't you say their names. We're not going. Don't you go neither. That's right. If we set foot in there, they'll throw us in those cobwebby rooms and lock the doors. Oh, now, I do think you might be exaggerating a mite. No way. I'll jump out of this truck right now if you say we have to go there. Okay. You don't have to go. Don't worry. We'll all meet up at Grace's Diner. How's that? While the others did their errands, Sari slipped around the back of the courthouse and down the alley, which was bordered on one side by railroad tracks and on the other side by a sprawling field dotted with junk cars and shacks. She could see the tilting Boxton Creek home ahead. The alley was littered with crumpled papers and dented hubcaps, with old rubber tires and empty pop cans, and Sari quickened her pace, feeling uneasy in this unfamiliar place. Dallas and Florida were standing on the sidewalk outside Grace's Diner when the door opened, and out shuffled Mr. Trepid. Well, trouble twins. Dallas and Florida backed away. Donut crumbs were clung to the front of Mr. Trepid's shimmery blue shirt. Where are those people, the old people? They're not bringing you back, are they? Florida took another 2 steps backwards. No, they're not bringing us back. They're getting stuff for our trips. Oh? Mr. Trepid glanced across the street at the red brick bank standing on the corner. They in there? Getting piles of money? At that stupid bank? No way. They don't need banks. They don't. Mr. Trepid picked a crumb off his shirt and popped it into his mouth. It was my distinct understanding that those two had piles of money. Piles of it. Collectors pay a lot of money for those little carving things they make. Well, they don't need to keep their money in any stupid bank. They've got understone funds. Yeah, they've got their own private banks out in the Holler, buried under stones. Is that right? How clever. And me and Dallas have our own understone funds. How charming. Mr. Trepid glanced at his watch. And when is it you are all heading on your trips? Right soon. Mr. Trepid looked at the sky. Very good indeed. I wish you all well. Then, flicking at the rest of the crumbs on his shirt, he said, must be off. And on down the sidewalk he scurried. What's he so happy about? He got rid of us. That's what. What do you guys think? Sari made her way through the littered alley and approached the Boxton Creek home from the back. As she was rounding the side, she heard Mrs. Trepid's voice. Stop that this instant, Mrs. Trepid commanded. Hush! Sari heard a baby cry and saw Mrs. Trepid leaning over a baby carriage. Her face bent down close to the crying occupant. Stop that! Is that a baby you're scolding? Mrs. Trepid straightened quickly and turned to Sari. This baby is so fussy, just like those twins were. Babies can be that way. Mrs. Trepid looked annoyed. You make it sound normal. Doesn't feel normal to me. Drives me crazy. Mrs. Trepid glanced around the side of the house. Are you bringing those twins back? No, not yet. Your husband asked me to pick up Dallas's passport here. Oh, well, then go inside. Morgan will find it for you. Mr. T isn't here. She jiggled the buggy. Aren't you supposed to leave some money? Am I? Yes, for the passport and all the trouble he went to. Oh, was it that much trouble? Yes. I believe you owe him $300. $300? Really? My passport was much, much, much less than that. The rest is for all the trouble and for transportation and documents and stuff. As Sari turned to go inside, Mrs. Trepid said, The twins. How are they? They're fine. No trouble at all. Chapter 23. Ready. Florida ran her hand across the edge of the boat. She couldn't believe that she and Tiller had fixed this boat, and she almost wished there was something else to build. Maybe this is the one thing I'm not too awful at, she had thought. Maybe my mother and father were builders of things. She glanced around the barn and up at the old stained rafters, feeling a little sad that this was the end of it and that the old man didn't even know it. Inside the cabin, she found Dallas in the loft trying on his new hiking boots. Boat's done. Want to see it? It's done? All completely done? Yep. Where's the old lady? Her name is Siri. Quit calling her the old lady. I'll call her whatever I want to call her. Quit telling me what to do. You're not my boss. Who said you were my boss? That afternoon, they retrieved their buried money, and that night in the loft, they stashed some in their shoes, some in their pockets, and some in their backpacks. I'm leaving enough money to pay for those backpacks they bought us, and for this flashlight and these boots. They'll come in handy, and I'll leave some money for these whittling knives, too. And I'll leave some for these sleeping bags. We could sure use sleeping bags. If we leave the money, that's fair, isn't it? It's not like we're taking anything then, right? Right. Now we'll just need to wait until they're asleep. And then we're out of here. Night train, here we come! Dallas and Florida were quiet, facing the windows, waiting for the owl. They were each feeling jittery and mournful, and neither of them could figure out why that was so, since they'd been waiting for this night for a long time. Taylor, you sleep yet? I was asleep until you woke me up. But you're awake now. Do I have a choice in the matter? Well, of course you have a choice. I'm not going to force you to stay awake. Did you want something? Remember when Dallas and Florida first came here and you asked them how old they were and when their birthday was? You remember that? Yeah. You remember when their birthday was? The 29th day of July. That's why you woke me up. You remember Mr. Trappett said he'd take care of Dallas's passport application and get his birth certificate and all that? Oh, I remember. I haven't completely lost my brains. Siri tapped his forehead. I know that. Well, I was looking at that passport today. The thing is, their birthday isn't the 29th of July. It's the 3rd of March. Kind of a big difference. March to July. Well, why do you think it is that they don't know when the real birthday is? Siri, at this hour of the night, I don't think much of anything. My brains are shut down. The motor's off. The engine... Okay. I get the picture. She blew out the candle. Tilly was snoring within minutes, but Sari lay there, listening to the night sounds. In the loft, Dallas closed his eyes. Immediately, a long-ago trio appeared, as if they were sneaking out from behind a curtain and taking their turn on stage. Floating across his mind stage were Mr. and Mrs. Cranbep and their daughter Gigi with their curly yellow hair. Dallas and Florida were 7 when they went to live with the Cranbeps. You're so lucky, Mrs. Cranbep had told them, to be with us now and to have a sister like Gigi. At night, Gigi would come into Dallas and Florida's room and spit on him. One night, after Gigi spit on him, Dallas punched her in the stomach. You stupid brute, Mrs. Cranbep had said to him, beating on a little girl. If you ever touch her again, you'll be out of here so fast your head will spin. The next night, Gigi came into their room and skipped over to Florida's bed. Your hair is stupid, she told Florida, and she tugged on it. Quit it, you little cockroach. That hurts. Gigi pulled so hard that pieces of Florida's hair came out in her hands. Later that night, Florida snuck into Gigi's room and gathered up all of Gigi's dolls. What do you think's gonna happen? Wake up, Dallas, she said. You and me, we've got some hair pulling to do. When the Cranbeps returned Florida and Dallas to the Boxton Creek home, Mrs. Cranbep emptied a bag of bald dolls onto the Trepid's desk. These twins are demented. Dallas, you think we should go now? You think they're asleep? Shh. Dallas sat up and reached for his boots. I guess they're asleep by now. I guess they won't hear us. But he stayed where he was, as if he were stuck to the bed. Florida sat on the bed opposite, facing him. I wonder what they'll think when they see that we've hit the grit. Shh, don't talk like that. They probably won't think anything. Florida smoothed the quilt on the bed, licked her finger, and rubbed at a spot on the quilt. You don't think they'll have like a gigantic heart attack or something, do you? You don't think that shock is going to scare them to death, do you? Aw, shoot. What'd you go and say that for? That idea wasn't even in my head till you said it. Forget it. They'll probably be relieved. They'll probably be glad that they don't have to cook for us anymore. They'll be glad they don't have to cart us along with them on their trips. They'll probably have a celebration. They'll probably... Enough already. If we're going, we better get moving. What? Now? No. Wow, only 2 chapters, but kind of a lot happened today, right, guys? So let's think back to that trip to Boxton. What do you think is going to come about of that conversation that Dallas in Florida had with Mr. Trepid? He seemed quite interested in the money, and they kind of gave him a lot of information, didn't they? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that he's just going to ignore it and pretend like he didn't have that conversation? Do you think that he's got a little idea that's probably not a great idea?